I still remember the first time I started looking into the darkest chapters of American history. It was not because I wanted to understand violence. It was because I wanted to understand people behind every major event. There are names, families, communities, and ordinary lives that existed before that moment changed everything. When people hear about the most devastating mass shootings in American history, they often remember the headlines. They remember the location. They remember the date. They remember the numbers. But numbers alone cannot explain what happened. A tragedy is not measured only by statistics. It is measured by the lives interrupted, the questions left behind, and the way an entire nation reacts afterward. While researching these events, I noticed something. Every one of these cases started with a normal day. People went to work. Students went to school. Families made plans. Friends talked about the future. Nobody woke up believing they were about to become part of a historical event. And that may be the most unsettling part. The most shocking moments in history often begin during ordinary moments. Today, I want to look back at 5 of the deadliest mass shootings in United States history, not to sensationalize them, not to focus on the darkness, but to understand what happened, how communities responded, and what these events revealed about a country trying to deal with unimaginable loss. The first event takes us back to 2007, to a college campus in Virginia. On a quiet spring morning, students at Virginia Tech began their day like any other. The campus was filled with the normal rhythm of university life, classes, conversations, people walking between buildings, a place designed for learning and growth. But that morning became one of the most painful days in modern American history. The attack at Virginia Tech became the deadliest school shooting in the United States at that time. When news began spreading, many people struggled to understand what had happened. How could a place built around education and opportunity become the scene of such tragedy? That question was asked again and again. Students who survived described confusion, fear, and disbelief. For many people outside the campus, the story felt impossible to comprehend. Universities are places where young people prepare for their futures. They represent possibility. They represent the next chapter of life, and that was part of what made the event so deeply shocking. In the days and weeks afterward, attention turned toward understanding how such an event could happen. Investigators examined the timeline. Officials reviewed warning signs. Experts discussed mental health, safety procedures, and prevention. But for many families, explanations could never replace what was lost. The Virginia Tech community responded by supporting one another. Memorials were created. Students gathered together. The campus became a place not only of sadness but also of remembrance. The tragedy also changed conversations across the country about campus safety and emergency response. Many schools began reviewing their procedures. Universities looked at communication systems and ways to respond faster during emergencies. The event became a painful lesson about preparation and prevention. But beyond policies and discussions, there was another story, the story of people who refused to let tragedy completely define their community. They remembered friends, classmates, and teachers not only for how they died, but for how they lived. Years later, many people connected to Virginia Tech still describe the importance of remembering the individuals behind the event. Because history is not just about what happened, it is about who was there. The second event takes us to a movie theater in Colorado in 2012. On that night, people gathered to watch a film. For many of them, It was supposed to be a simple evening, a chance to relax, a chance to spend time with friends, a normal experience that millions of people have every day. But during that showing, an attacker entered the theater and opened fire. The incident at a theater in Aurora, Colorado, became one of the deadliest mass shootings in American history. What made the event especially shocking was the setting. A movie theater is usually associated with entertainment, with imagination, with stories on a screen. People enter a theater expecting to experience a fictional world. They do not expect their own lives to suddenly become part of a national tragedy. After the attack, the community faced a painful period of mourning. Families waited for information. Survivors tried to process what they had experienced. The country once again began asking difficult questions. How do we prevent these events? How do we identify risks before they become reality? How do communities recover afterward? The investigation examined the attacker's background, planning, and motives, but for many people affected, the central focus was not the person responsible. It was the victims, the people who arrived that night simply wanting to enjoy a movie, the families who expected their loved ones to come home, the friends who lost someone without warning. In the aftermath, the community showed remarkable support. People organized memorials. Strangers offered help. Survivors shared stories about courage and kindness during a frightening moment. One of the strongest patterns seen after many tragedies is that communities often reveal their greatest compassion. During their darkest hours, people who have never met each other come together. They bring food. They offer support. They stand beside strangers. It does not erase the pain, but it shows something important about human nature. Even after terrible events, people continue searching for ways to help one another. The third event happened in 2016 in Orlando, Florida. It took place at Pulse, a nightclub that had become an important gathering place for many people in the local community. For those who visited that night, it was supposed to be a place of music, friendship, and connection. Instead, it became the site of the deadliest attack against the LGBTQ+ community in United States history. The Pulse nightclub shooting deeply affected not only Orlando, but people across the world. The victims came from different backgrounds. They had different stories, different dreams, different futures they hoped to experience. But in one moment, they became connected by tragedy. After the attack, Orlando entered a period of mourning. People gathered to remember those who were lost. The city saw an enormous response from residents who wanted to show support. Blood donation centers received overwhelming support. Memorials appeared. People left flowers and messages of love. The tragedy also led to broader discussions about hate, extremism, public safety, and the challenges faced by targeted communities. But behind those larger conversations were individual stories. A person who loved music, a person who was building a career, a person who had plans for the next day, a person who was loved by family and friends. This is something that can easily be forgotten when discussing historical events. A headline can summarize what happened, but it cannot summarize a human life. Every person affected by a tragedy had a complete story before that moment. They had childhood memories, favorite songs, personal dreams, people who cared about them. And remembering that humanity is one of the most important parts of understanding these events. The fourth event occurred in Las Vegas in 2017. Unlike many other mass shootings, this attack happened from a location overlooking a large outdoor gathering. Thousands of people had gathered for a music festival. They were there for entertainment, for celebration, for a shared experience. Then, suddenly, the event became a scene of fear and confusion. The Las Vegas shooting became the deadliest mass shooting in modern United States history. The scale of the event shocked the country. Many people who were there described a moment when they did not immediately understand what was happening. Crowds can be difficult to manage during any emergency. When people do not know where danger is coming from, confusion spreads quickly. Afterward, investigators worked to understand the attack. The public searched for answers, but one of the biggest unanswered questions remained the same. Why? That question appears after many tragedies. People want a simple explanation. They want a reason that makes sense. But sometimes the answers are complicated. Sometimes they leave more questions than certainty. In the aftermath, stories of courage emerged. People helped strangers. Friends protected one another. First responders moved toward danger while others moved away. These moments often receive less attention than the tragedy itself, but they reveal another side of these events. The human response, the instinct to help, the decision to care for someone else during chaos, the willingness to act when others need support. The Las Vegas community also showed resilience. Memorials were created. Survivors shared their experiences. People returned to the city and continued living their lives. Recovery does not mean forgetting. It means finding a way to continue while carrying the memory of what happened. The fifth event brings us to Texas in 2017 at a small church in Sutherland Springs. For many people there, it was a normal Sunday, a day centered around community and faith, a place where neighbors gathered together. But that morning became one of the deadliest attacks at a place of worship in American history. The tragedy affected a small community where many people knew each other. In smaller towns, connections often run deep. Neighbors are not just people who live nearby. They are friends, family, connections, people who share memories. When a tragedy happens in such a community, the impact can feel personal to everyone. The days afterward were filled with grief, but they were also filled with support. People came together. Communities offered assistance. Neighbors helped neighbors. The event once again raised national discussions about violence, prevention, security, and public safety. But for the people directly affected, the most important thing was remembering those who were lost. Each of these 5 events happened in a different place: a university, a theater, a nightclub, a concert, a church. Different environments, different communities, different stories. But there are also similarities. They all remind us how quickly ordinary moments can change. They remind us that behind every statistic are real people, and they remind us that understanding these events requires more than remembering dates and numbers. It requires empathy. When studying history, it is easy to focus only on the event itself, but history is also about what happens afterward. How communities rebuild, how families remember, how society learns, how people try to prevent future tragedies. The hardest questions are often the ones without simple answers. Why did this happen? Could it have been stopped? What can be done differently in the future? These questions continue to be debated across America. People have different opinions, different ideas, different beliefs about solutions. But one thing remains clear: every person affected by these tragedies was more than a headline. They were individuals with stories. They were loved by someone. They mattered to someone. When I look back at these events, the biggest lesson is not just about tragedy. It is about humanity. It is about how people respond when the worst moments arrive. It is about the strangers who help each other, the communities that rebelled, the families who continue honoring the memories of those they lost. History remembers the tragedy, but people remember the lives. And maybe that is the most important thing we can do. Not only remember how people died, but remember how they lived. Because behind every event in history, there are human stories waiting to be understood. And I want to ask you something. When future generations look back at these moments in American history, what do you think will be the most important lesson they learn? The failures that allowed these tragedies to happen, or the strength people showed afterward? When trying to rebuild,